Kenya's oldest and largest game park is home to a huge variety of spectacular animals. But what Tsavo is really famous for is its 11,000 savanna elephants. Standing tall amongst these herds, the impressively adorned bull elephants, the Tuskers.
A Tusker is an elephant that has tusks that weigh over 45 kilos. These are really old bull elephants because it takes a long time to grow tusks that are that big.
These great patriarchs can live up to the age of 60 and play a crucial role in the survival of their species.
They're the elephants with the most successful genes for reproducing. They're going to produce offspring that are big, strong, likely to survive the challenges of being a wild elephant.
They have a massive repository of knowledge that they pass on to younger generations. They seem to know where the water will be, and they will lead their families over these vast distances. That's why the Tuskers are so important.
Tsavo's most famous tusker is Satao. Estimated to be at least 50 years old, Satao's tusks have grown so long they scrape along the ground. But Satao and the Tuskers aren't just an attraction for tourists. They are also a target for poachers.
Everybody who wants to kill an elephant looks for the bigger elephants, bigger tusks.
The Tuskers are being hunted into extinction. There are just 12 left in this part of Kenya. Their only defense against the poacher's rifle? The thin green line of the Kenyan Wildlife Service. But there are just 400 rangers to patrol the 16,000 square miles of the Greater Tsavo Conservation Area. That's a landmass almost twice the size of New Jersey.
It's a huge, huge area. It's very, very hard to patrol it. These elephants move thousands of kilometers every year.
The job's not just tough, it's extremely dangerous. 63 rangers have died in the line of duty since the Wildlife Service was set up in 1990. Many of them in firefights with poachers.
You ask them to surrender, they will not surrender, they will eat you back. Down! It is like war.
Ian Saunders is Chief Operations Officer for a non-profit organization battling to save Tsavo's elephants. The Tsavo Trust aims to support wildlife, habitat, and communities in Greater Tsavo. Alongside Saunders is Richard Muller. He runs the Trust's Big Tusker project. Every morning he flies over the reserve, monitoring and watching over the Tuskers.
What we do is we support the Kenya Wildlife Service and their activities within the park through aerial surveillance. This aerial surveillance is there to observe any illegal activity and report it, and also to monitor specific groups of elephants that may be under threat because of the size of their ivory or their particular location in relation to high-risk areas.
These aerial surveillance sorties are essential given the vast size of the area.
The Smuggling Conservation Area, which is the home of Kenya's largest elephant population, is twice the size of Israel. Here in Savo, we have a few hundred rangers. You would need probably 2 brigades to secure this area, and so several thousand men and women, which I don't think any wildlife agency in the world could deploy.
In 2012, Kenya lost almost 1 elephant for every day of the year. Over 40 poachers were killed in clashes with rangers. Even so, many more seem willing to risk their lives given the huge price that ivory sells for. Satao's tusks alone are estimated to be worth $1 million each. And then, in early 2013, a bad situation gets a whole lot worse.
Where we lost 11 elephants, all the adults and even young elephants were killed. This is quite unusual because initially poachers will target big tuskers. Even tuskless young elephants were killed.
A whole family just shot dead.
They just cleared the whole lot.
It's a day of unprecedented slaughter. Detachments of rangers rush to the scene. Joining the operation is the Savo Trust's Ian Saunders, who is also an honorary ranger. Saunders is not just a conservationist. He's a British Army veteran skilled in counterinsurgency. His job is to back up the Kenyan Wildlife Service in any way he can.
It was quite similar to scenes that I've seen in other parts of the world in war zones.
Saunders has served in Afghanistan and Northern Ireland, but even he is disturbed by this killing.
It was a family massacre. And if that doesn't drive you to find the guys that did it, then nothing will.
Saunders was senior security advisor to the UN in Kabul and has subsequently trained and run anti-poaching units in Africa. He brings a wealth of specialist skills to this operation.
You almost replay through your imagination what went on there, what actually happened. You can see where the guy stood. You can see how he fired.
As he walks the crime scene, Saunders looks for clues to build up a picture of the poachers. How many men? How many weapons? What sort of weapons? Are the killers professionals or amateurs?
An experienced poacher will use a small amount of ammunition to kill an elephant. An inexperienced poacher will spray it.
He traces a line of spent shell cases. They are evenly spread out. This was no spray job.
They knew what they were doing, yeah.
The Kenya Wildlife Service now launches a major operation to hunt down the poachers. Ground teams fan out from the scene looking for tracks. Aircraft are scrambled to try and spot the rapidly fleeing gang. A major concern is that the poachers may next target Savo's biggest elephants, Satao and the Tuskers. One team is assigned to follow the animals. The hope is the Tuskers may act as bait.
We follow the animals so that if somebody wants to poach, then we are near there.
But for all his experience, Saunders knows the poachers have the upper hand.
They're like a mist. They run and they walk, very, very lightly equipped. They know how to survive. They're very, very hard to detect.
Despite all their efforts, the team finds no trace of the poachers. The worry is, they're still out there, waiting to strike the Tuskers. To keep the pressure up on the poachers, the Savo Trust now uses its eye in the sky to monitor the Tuskers. Richard Muller has 18 years' experience as a bush pilot. He's flying the perfect spotter plane. It can fly slow and low and land on the roughest airstrip. Throughout early May, Muller makes regular sightings of the Tuskers, and all seems well. Then, in mid-May, the annual rains arrive in southern Savo. On the morning of May 19th, Richard Muller spots Satao. The Tusker is heading towards the freshly filled water holes. But they are in an area very close to the park boundary.
It's one of the most vulnerable places for poaching. It's not fenced. It borders areas where there are a lot of small arms.
This area is a notorious hunting ground for elephant killers. It's crisscrossed with tracks and dirt roads. Ideal for poachers wanting to make a fast getaway with ivory.
We know to hit quickly, remove the tusks, and within no time disappear.
Fearing for Satao's safety, Muller radios in for backup. Extra patrols are moved in, but they need to be careful. They know well-armed poachers could be close. The plane and ground teams scour the area where Satao was last spotted, along the park boundary. But there's no sign of the elephant. Days later, the Savo Trust's plane finally spots something. It's an elephant, and it's down. The rangers move in cautiously. Then they see the elephant. It's dead, and the tusks are gone. They come to a sickening realization. The mutilated elephant is Satao. This mighty elephant has spent 50 years roaming free across Savo. But finally, the poachers have won. Kenya's most famous elephant is dead. Despite his horror, Saunders gets to work on his investigation. It's soon clear how the poachers killed the Tusker. They've not used firearms, which rangers could hear. They've downed Satao using a silent killer, an arrow tipped with poison.
It's applied just behind the arrowhead on the shaft of the arrow. So when it hits an elephant, it gets into the bloodstream. The difference with this is obviously it's silent and so difficult to detect.
The death it delivers is exceptionally cruel.
Poisoning is horrific because it's not a swift death. It often leads to slow internal failure of the organs.
It could take days or weeks. In the case of Satao, it took weeks, which means he must have been in great pain for a very long time.
When poachers poison an elephant like Satao, they are careful to keep a safe distance. They will wait until the dying animal can no longer put up a fight.
poachers are going up while those animals are still alive and taking their machetes and actually hacking off the tusks while the animals are still conscious. The suffering that they experience is phenomenal.
But the Tsavo Trust wants a series of further checks run before announcing the news to the press. The head has been brutally mutilated, and the telltale tusks are gone. Though it suspects the worst, the Trust has to be 100% sure it is Satao before going public. Back at base, Saunders starts a detailed examination of the brutalized corpse. He compares photos of the dead elephant with the most recent pictures of Satao. He checks the ears, looking for the individual nicks, tears, and gouges that an old animal picks up over its lifetime. Satao has relatively clean ears, no cuts, tears, or obvious scars. He matches the ears of the dead elephant with those of Satao. The ears of the dead elephant are clean. There is no longer any doubt. The death of Kenya's most famous tusker is now official. Even for this battle-hardened ex-soldier, it's a body blow.
When you're in a contact situation, in a war zone, things are happening, people are getting killed, blah, 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 blah. It's all going on. You close your mind off to it. You close your mind off to death, to destruction, to mutilation, and you just carry on and do your job. Once you open that door in your mind a little bit, everything comes flooding in, and that's when you hit the emotion.
The news soon breaks 200 miles away in the Kenyan capital. Social media immediately picks up on the killing of Satao, and within hours, news of the death goes viral.
The amazing thing about Satao is that when he died, I posted a blog about him, and I got hundreds of thousands of viewers and thousands of comments. People were crying because of the death of this magnificent elephant. They couldn't believe he'd died. Probably the biggest elephant in the world. There really was a sense of complete and utter despondency and grief. I've never seen such huge outpouring of grief. It had this massive effect, not just across Kenya, but around the world.
The pressure now mounts on the Kenyan government. An outraged public demands action.
We know that it went all the way to the head of state. Ask the president, what is going on? Why can't you do something about this?
The hunt for Satao's killers is now ratcheted up. The case passes from the Tsavo Rangers to a dedicated detective team in Nairobi. The Kenya Wildlife Service Intelligence Unit coordinates anti-poaching and smuggling operations throughout Kenya. The team immediately activates their network of local contacts to find any leads on Satao's killers. Mark Goss is one of those contacts. Mark runs one of Kenya's most successful undercover networks. His covert unit has tracked down numerous poachers. This success is down to Mark's top agent, who, for operational reasons, must remain anonymous.
Our head of intelligence always has to cover his tracks. His family lives far away from his area of operation. He moves around, rents different houses, because he wants to keep his cover. He infiltrates. He's the one who really puts his neck on the line to break into these different poaching networks.
Over the years, this undercover operative has built up a wide network of paid informers. All potential leads are quickly passed on to the team in Nairobi. One tip-off concerns a backstreet lab suspected of producing elephant poison. The poison is cheaply manufactured from a common African plant called Acanthera. It is the same type of toxin that killed Satao. A heavily armed rapid response ranger unit is dispatched to Kilifi, just over 30 miles west of Tsavo National Park. These rangers are authorized to pursue and arrest suspected wildlife criminals operating inside or outside the national park. They catch the poisoner red-handed. They not only shut down the lab, they seize something that could be a breakthrough lead on the case.
The mobile phone is a good gadget because it leads us through networks. We have always used mobile phones, mobile numbers to track poachers or their dealers.
In Nairobi, the investigation team works through the night. They check cell numbers they hope may lead to Satao's killers.
The KWS intelligence unit have officers who are trained in analyzing data, and they have some powerful telephone forensic data analysis tools, which then opens up doors to investigate other people.
The intel trail leads to McKinnon Road, a few miles south of the park boundary, where Satao was killed. There's not much to McKinnon Road. A mosque, a few gas stations, and a string of wayside cafes. The tip-off suggests the poachers who killed Satao are holed up in a roadside motel. The rangers must stay focused. Their suspects could be heavily armed. They could be walking straight into a firefight. They get the men, but there's no sign of the ivory. If these men did kill Satao, where are the tusks? The suspects say nothing. But the rangers do have one lead to go on. This small town close to the national park is a renowned hangout for dealers wanting to buy poached ivory. It is also on the main highway to the city of Mombasa, Kenya's biggest port and the main exit point for smuggled ivory.
Mombasa is hot, it's humid. It's got its seedy side, but then what interesting city doesn't? And it's a big, booming town, loads of business going on, and of course it's got the port there, which is a driver of much of its economy.
Mombasa is full of commercial activities. Containers go, containers out, business is moving, and a lot of pressure of not stopping business. But that also means criminal activities are also very much welcome.
Much of Mombasa's trade is with the Far East, which happens to be the world's biggest ivory market.
The statistics show that over 70% of the illegal ivory is going to China. They have a history of carving ivory items. And what we're seeing is with those industries that are carving the ivory, some of them had a license to carve legal ivory, but the amount of carvings that they're churning out means that they're obviously bringing in a lot of illegal ivory to supply this ever-growing demand for these status symbols and these needless trinkets.
Despite the obvious criminality, demand for ivory has never been greater.
It's evidenced by the numbers of very large seizures that have been made, either in China or in Africa, all of which are destined for the Chinese market. So clearly the demand has gone up, and clearly people are seeing it as an asset that they can flaunt their wealth with. But it's like any other status symbol. There will be cycles when a Louis Vuitton bag is your status symbol, and right now ivory is the status symbol.
So we're seeing between 25 to 50,000 elephants being killed every year to supply this needless trade in ivory. And there are reports saying that in the next decade, we might see a fifth of the African elephant population totally wiped out.
If Satao's tusks are now in Mombasa, the job of finding them becomes much more complex and risky. The team's target has changed from the poachers to the traffickers. They are much more dangerous players. Men who have the power and influence to control extensive smuggling networks.
The one who is holding the gun is not the actual one that generates killings of elephants.
These are huge international syndicates that are able to control an entire supply chain from an African reserve to an Asian market seamlessly.
There are traffickers and big kingpins responsible for the killings of 10,000 elephants, 30,000 elephants.
The kingpins who run the illegal ivory trade are highly organized, well-connected, and extremely ruthless.
These are not people that you take lightly, and they can be dangerous, and they needed to be treated in the same way that you would treat a drugs lord or a firearms dealer. You can assume there are certain levels to which they're prepared to go to protect their business interests.
If Satao's tusks have been delivered to Mombasa, they will have disappeared into the warren of back streets surrounding the port. The syndicates hold the ivory in a series of storerooms and warehouses, often set up as legitimate front companies.
It's real organized crime here. They may use an import-export company as a cover. They may use other methods to conceal their operations. There are people on a payroll to make sure things go smoothly.
The key to smuggling the ivory is to disguise it.
There's many ways of concealing ivory: inserting it inside sacks of sesame, inserting it inside cocoa, cutting it into smaller pieces.
Once the ivory is concealed amongst legitimate cargo, it's ready to load into a shipping container.
We're talking a couple of tons at a time.
Easing the illegal consignments through the port, a steady succession of bribes and kickbacks.
They pay off policemen at roadblocks, and then they'll pay off the customs officials at Mombasa port. They'll have police officers, detectives on the payroll to make sure that if they are caught, they don't go down.
For the criminals, the riskiest part of their operation is when all the separately stashed ivory is finally brought together for loading into a shipping container. If they've not paid off the right people, they could be raided and lose millions of dollars worth of contraband.
They will arrange for all of that ivory to be delivered. It will come to one place because it will be containerized in that one place. It will not be held for any length of time because that becomes a risk.
But assembling tons of ivory from all across the city also involves lots of comings and goings. It's just the sort of suspicious activity the teams searching for Satao's tusks are desperate to uncover. They have teams of agents working the port area. And then they get a tip-off. An informer contacts the Kenya wildlife team. The tip-off concerns a 46-year-old Mombasa businessman.
He's an informer who reported on you. Yes, a good citizen reported on you.
The man is called Faisal Ali Mohammed. It's a familiar name to the Kenya Wildlife Service.
He was on our watch list. We thought all along he was a dealer. But how to catch him used to be a problem.
The tip-off leads them to a large white truck parked in a Mombasa vehicle storage depot.
The dealers are very clever because they don't want to be caught in the action. So you really have to have very good intelligence in terms of where they operate from, the possible areas where they keep their ivory. They are normally very careful.
If their lead is good, it could crack the case of who killed Satao wide open. They now start watching the mysterious Faisal Ali Mohammed. It is something they have long wanted to do.
Our people were after him, and we had shared this information even with the police.
Now officers from the Mombasa police force join the operation. Surveillance links Faisal with a truck parked in a Mombasa auto dealership.
You do a lot of background checks, a lot of open source investigation. Who owns it and who are the people behind it?
The team discover Faisal has paid to store the truck in the yard of a company called Fuji Motors.
That park was used for storing vehicles as a safe place. And then his name was appearing in the documents as the person who signed for that vehicle.
For several days, the team watch and wait.
There is always a specific trigger that will make you send the troops in. If they see what they think is a load of ivory being put in the back of a truck, that truck could drive off. And that's as simple as that. They've lost the load and they've lost their evidence. That's the end of their prosecution.
Finally, the officers make their move on Fuji Motors.
The feeling when you go on a bust is heightened anticipation. It's butterflies in the stomach because you know that in the next few minutes, all hell is going to break loose.
In the office, police question the two suspects. When asked about the contents of the truck, the men reportedly maintain the vehicle is loaded with household equipment. But the lawmen are keen to check it out for themselves. When they inspect the truck, there's no sign of stoves and freezers. Instead, they uncover something far more valuable. They come across a hidden stash of ivory, and it's starting to look like a significant haul. It is alleged that the suspects now adopt the tried and tested Mombasa tactic. But apparently this time, it doesn't work.
And then we knew that it was a seizure, and we knew there was arrest.
The raid proves to be one of the biggest ivory busts in Kenyan history. 228 tusks and 70 cut ivory sections weighing 2 tons. Hundreds of elephants slaughtered to supply a demand for ivory carvings, trinkets, and ornaments.
We looked at the tusks that were laid out on the pavement in Mombasa. Some of those tusks were massive.
The size of some tusks suggests they may have come from the endangered Tuskers, and possibly even from Satao.
I looked at them and they looked suspiciously like tusks from Savo elephants.
Investigators realize they could be on the trail of the killers of Satao. Now they focus on the person suspected of amassing this macabre haul. The man who paid to store the truck containing the ivory. But Faisal Ali Mohammed is missing.
Now, when that bust was made, Faisal was nowhere to be found, and an arrest warrant was put out for him. It then transpired he skipped the country.
The authorities are closer to a result than ever. But has this high-profile seizure driven their chief suspect deeper into hiding?
The main man has disappeared at the right time for him, and it doesn't sound like it was a coincidence. I think he was probably tipped off by somebody.
He's a businessman, he's well connected, he's well resourced, and clearly he has connections in the right places.
The rumor is that Faisal has fled abroad. But Kenyan activists are determined the fugitive will not escape justice.
We made a lot of publicity about it. The public opinion was very, very strong.
The government responds by reaching out to the international law agency, Interpol. With a multi-million-dollar budget and the backing of 190 countries, Interpol now heads up the search for the Kenyan fugitive. It issues a so-called red notice alert for Faisal Ali Mohammed.
A red notice is the highest level of flag that Interpol can put on a suspect, and it is the closest thing to an international arrest warrant.
It demonstrates that wildlife crime is being taken more seriously at much higher political levels.
But despite all their resources and months of effort, there are no sightings. The Faisal case is starting to go cold. Then at the very end of 2014, there's a break. A man matching Faisal's description is spotted in Dar es Salaam. If the man is Faisal, he's not traveled far. Dar es Salaam is just across the Kenyan border, 200 miles south of Mombasa. Interpol agents fly in and join Tanzanian police officers to follow up on the lead.
Once they've identified who it is, they will do some surveillance. to be happy in their own minds that they've got the right guy.
They make a positive ID and shadow Faisal Ali Mohammed's every move. Just before Christmas 2014, they tail the suspect to Dar es Salaam's busy market district. They are ready for the takedown.
Following the target in his car, the first car in the surveillance team will drive straight in front and block him from getting out forwards. The second car will block him to the rear, and those guys in the second car will then jump straight out and take him out of the vehicle.
At 10:42 p.m., Faisal Ali Mohammed, the man suspected of amassing the 2-ton Mombasa ivory cache, is arrested. The next day, Faisal is brought back to Kenya. He and the other suspects arrested at Fuji Motors are accused of the dealing and possession of elephant tusks. They plead not guilty to all charges. Faisal is denied bail, as he is considered a flight risk.
The arrest of Faisal Ali Mohammed is the first time a suspected major ivory trafficker has been arrested in East Africa. This is a landmark case, not just for Kenya, but for Africa.
To see someone who allegedly involved in that at a high level is hugely significant for conservation and for the fight against the illegal wildlife trade.
Faisal's court case commenced in August 2015. If found guilty, he could spend the rest of his life behind bars. It may never be possible to link the Mombasa ivory seizure with the death of Satao. But the slaughter of the iconic Tusker has galvanized public opinion in Kenya. Pressure on the government has resulted in new legislation leading to tougher sentences for poachers and traffickers. The Kenya Wildlife Service has received extra funding for modern equipment and additional rangers. Initial results are encouraging, with the number of elephants poached in Kenya now falling. It's estimated there are just 11 Tuskers left in Kenya. But the Savo Trust has some good news. They report a number of younger bulls are maturing into fully fledged Tuskers. Satao's death shocked the world. For many, it also bolstered the fight to preserve the Tuskers, the last great land giants of the animal world.
When an iconic animal like that is killed in a violent manner for something as senseless as their ivory, then that obviously has an impact.
How they're killed and why they're killed just for some ivory trinket is incomprehensible.
While it was unbelievably tragic that we lost Satao, his death really was a wake-up call.